Now, please help me welcome our speaker, Rebecca Gebhardt. Rebecca is the founder and CEO of Rise Up Consulting, and she has a very insightful session planned for you, all about how to train sales leaders. You're really going to get a lot out of this one. So, Rebecca, the session is all yours.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, happy lunch hour or whatever time it is from wherever you are watching, either here live with us or the replay. It's a huge pleasure to be here with all of you. And when I speak to learning and development leaders and sales enablement leaders, it's just fun to be around my people that I collaborate with on a daily basis. And so today, we're going to talk about something that's really critically important to the sustained success of any sales organization, and that's how to truly conduct a great sales leadership program and some of the lies that prevent us from truly succeeding. A little bit of my background. I began my sales career in the year 2000, not in theory, but through hands-on experience in direct sales. And since that time, I've led teams and built different organizations. And my motivation for creating sales leadership programs stems from the impact that exceptional sales leaders have had on me and in my own journey. And it was their leadership that I firmly believe really propelled me into that top 1% of sales leaders. And so I aim to help organizations build both revenue and personal growth in their developmental programs for sales leaders, and believe that sales leadership really is the key for team performance and scaling. When I launched Rise Up Consulting back in 2018, I had focused on individual sales coaching. And as I worked with them, I thought, well, they were from all over. What would happen if we did group coaching, that sales leaders could be around each other and have some camaraderie? And that led to the next question of what would happen if all sales leaders at organizations were aligned. And so that's when we went corporate. So I collaborate with internal learning and development teams, senior executive leadership teams on this topic. And while I don't have a background in sales enablement in particular, this niche where I found myself has really become my purpose. And it's such a joy to hear transformations that have happened. And I'll be sharing stories kind of throughout this, but my goal is to share some of the insights of working with corporate sales leadership teams for years, being in that seat, things that I've written about in both of my books on there, on the screen there, and then also through some of the certifications I've done that focus on a strength-based approach. So here's where we're going to be going today. We're going to first discuss why typical leadership development programs don't work for sales leaders. Then we're going to dive into 5 common lies that are really believed about sales leaders and the impact that they have. And then we're going to get into a lot of the meat, which I'm sure a lot of you came for, we're going to discuss 7 non-negotiables that every sales leadership program should have. And then lastly, you'll walk away at the very end. I'm going to provide you with very inexpensive, mostly free, low-cost actions that you can do today, tomorrow, very small yet critical moves you can make to start moving your sales organization in the right direction. So I'm curious, though, I see people commenting. Hi, Kara. So right now, what do you see working well for sales leaders in your current leadership development programs? Like, what's really been working for you? And I would love it if you would post that in the chat. Something I found even before this call today, I was speaking with a sales enablement leader at an organization, and I just got so excited hearing what was working for them and some of his challenges. But what do you think's really working for you? And I'm checking my chat here as well. It's okay if we have silence as well. Or maybe not a lot's working, but okay, thank you here. So Carolyn says the opportunity to engage leaders ongoing throughout the year for development. So that's great. We're going to talk about that today. I love that. It's engaging and it's an ongoing process. So that's one of the lies that tend to be believed. Wherever you find yourself here today, whatever's working or not, I would encourage you to reflect on your notes or collaborate with other people you see in this webinar to really think, how could you make your sales leadership development programs better than they are today? So today we're going to explore why they're different. We're going to start out here, why sales leadership development isn't just another version of your standard leadership training. And we're going to use some four-legged friends to make our point. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Casey to put up a little poll. Sometimes we have a ton of animal lovers, but what team are you on? Are you team dog, team cat, or team both?
The results are trickling in. I'm going to give
Oh,
it just a moment.
you're welcome to comment in the chat too. If you are team dog or team cat, if you are a pet owner, you can comment on their name as well. But just curious, we're gonna break them down. Team dog, excellent choice. Just kidding, just kidding. We have a 75-pound Springer Spaniel here. We are team dog. Team cat. Team both. Okay. So I actually don't even know who the winner is here, but that's okay. I love this question. I love talking about cats and dogs here. So let's dive into it. We're going to be making the case for cats and dogs with leadership development. So training a dog is like generalized leadership development programs. Dogs tend to respond to structured guidance, loyalty-based relationships, and well-established commands. So you can apply standard training techniques across different breeds of dogs, and you're going to get reasonably consistent results. Like many general leadership roles, operations, HR, and finance, there are universal skills that benefit from standard frameworks and standard principles. And then you have cats. So cats are independent, they're opportunistic, and they're more responsive to motivation that serves their interests. Training a cat, like a sales leader, requires nuance, timing, and a deep understanding of behavior patterns. They don't follow commands, they respond to incentives. And so sales leaders are like this. They lead teams that thrive on competition, urgency, individual performance metrics, and their development must emphasize that agility, real-time decision-making, resilience, and motivational psychology that's different from traditional leadership paths. So you wouldn't use a leash and a treat bag to train a cat the same way you do a dog. So why develop sales leaders using the same approach as everyone else? We really need to understand who we are training. Now, of course, there's always that one exception. And on your screen is a screenshot of my brother's dog, Hobbs, sorry, his cat, Hobbs, who looks like a dog, but this is a cat. I don't know if anyone remembers that Calvin and Hobbes cartoon, but he loved it. And so when he grew up, he named his cat Hobbs. Hobbs is on a leash, okay? So, and I don't know if I necessarily need to say this to this point, but we don't live in an either or world. I'm aware that sales leaders aren't cats and other leaders aren't dogs. There's going to be overlap. But to assume that sales leaders are going to customize training to their situations isn't always helpful. As learning and development leaders, if you confuse generalized leadership development with sales leadership, you can cost yourself credibility. And for those sales enablement leaders who are in here, if you confuse advanced sales training with sales leadership development, you're risking the same thing. Yes, you could put a leash on the cat and it might be walking, but how does that look, feel, and ultimately, what's the point? So I want to share this next slide with you and discuss some of these differences. And I feel like it helps to make this comparison. And again, I generalize here, it's gonna the nuances and the specifics are going to be very different based on where you work, the market, the products or services that you sell. But just some of these main differences here. So generalized leadership development is much more structured, consistent, kind of goes longer. Um, Sales leadership development's got to be more dynamic and adapting. I have worked with organizations where their generalized leadership development programs are 2 years long. I just met yesterday with an L&D leader who they're kicking off their next version of leadership development, and it's going to be a 3-year program. Sales leaders' average tenure is shorter than that. So you have to do faster paced training. So we do weekly or bi-weekly, sometimes asynchronous group learning to really help with that urgency and shorten the gap between learning and application. There needs to be accountability in there, but that the dynamics of how it changes is going to be pretty important. And because sales leaders are focused on where they spend their time, you have to make sure that it's very targeted and it's dynamic. So the next line there about being important concepts and then adding urgent concepts to sales leadership. Generalized leadership development can include topics like strategy and vision, communication and feedback, which are all important for sales leaders as well. But sales leaders live in a reactive and fast-paced world. They need urgent training on things like coaching in the micro moments, thinking clearly when they're stressed because they're under an immense amount of pressure, how to calm down a large client or a high-performing salesperson. So we like to develop sales leaders in these short moments that will also carry them over into some more intentional development that they can do with their team. The next line is performance results, the correlated to the program versus causation. Any program assessor will tell you that leadership development programs they make a difference, but it's more difficult to connect that causation. You can do it with sales programs and you can also do it with sales leadership. So development programs, you have to connect the behaviors and the skills to what's being coached, and you can connect all of that. SBI and Revenue Enablement Society did a finding. They did a research that found that 40% of teams have no dedicated sales leadership development programs. And those that don't deliver all the training to managers consistently. So I think that point was made by Carolyn earlier that, what did you say? Ongoing throughout the year, which is powerful. Teams that have dedicated sales leadership programs have higher quota attainment. So making that connection, which is powerful. The next line on the team-oriented goals of collaboration, but also adding in some competition. There are unique, ego-driven, and intrinsically motivated people who flock to this space. Salespeople and leaders are often a distinct breed, right? They're highly competitive, results-driven, and leading them requires an understanding of how to harness that without stifling their individuality. So it's a balance of fostering, even within the development programs, collaboration and healthy competition. And lastly, this deals with scenario-based training in the leadership programs. You could do generalized scenarios in generalized leadership development, but those have to be much more specific to sales. It's got to be targeted and to the point. What's the bottom line you're trying to communicate to them? How can the training time then be spent on them practicing and doing exercises to help them implement what they learn, fail in a safe environment? They're under constant pressure to be hitting quotas. So having these scenarios mimic their real life, what it currently is, and what the vision for that is in the future is going to be pretty important. That was a lot of stuff. So I want to pause, and I'm curious again to get your thoughts. So if you could contribute to the chat here. So we just spent some time going over the differences between generalized leadership development and sales leadership. What do you know? What have you found? Because that was not an exhaustive list by any means, but what do you know about training and development sales leaders that's different from training other leaders within an organization? Love to hear your thoughts on this. I know there's always different lessons that are learned and the impact that it can make, but they are very different. Okay, now I see it. My chat wasn't working. I have three screens going here. Um, Tough question. Yes. Okay. So, varied and realistic experiences is to meet people where they are and engage them in small drips. Melody. Yes. I love that. It's a balance between leading people to who they can be and what they could be, but also meeting them where they at so they can find wins. Um, Puppies to cats. This is really funny. Um, and then who do we have here? Jamie, sorry, I'm on my screen, so sorry if I'm leaning in a little bit. You can focus on vision and feedback, but micro coaching can help them focus on what they need to avoid, like objections under stress. Yes, and it will be, the webinar will be recorded. Um, Shorter attention spans, sustainability is challenging. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. More focused on the sale, numbers, getting it done. Yeah, it's very, very different. And so taking some of these ideas that I'm sharing and some of the brilliant suggestions here in the chat, come back to that and use that to spark some reflection after the webinar on what you could really be doing to maximize that. What we're going to dive into now is we're going to talk about these leadership lies about sales leaders. And so these are the top five. These are not the only lies. If you have other lies besides these five as I'm speaking, feel free also to contribute that in the chat. But lie number one, great salespeople automatically become great sales leaders. I wrote an entire book on this, so I'm not going to go. I could talk about all day about this, but I won't go into it. But the truth is the qualities that make a great salesperson, that individual drive, self-reliance, closing skills, they're very different than what makes a great sales leader. Leadership's about coaching, empathy, strategic planning. So distinguishing, we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but distinguishing between what makes a great salesperson and what makes great a sales leader will really help. I am not under the belief that top salespeople make terrible managers. I think people get confused when I speak about that. It's just that they don't automatically make great sales leaders. And that lie and bias can really clog up a bench strength and succession planning within an organization. Lie number two, sales leaders simply need to be charismatic motivators. So while motivation is a key component, effective sales leadership is more than just rah-rah speeches. It's a vigorous data analysis, pipeline reviews, accurate forecasting, skilled in deal coaching. And they also really need to know their team members. They need to develop and coach the inside, the person, understand what their strengths are, and really unleash the potential that's inside of them. And those are different skills. The next lie is sales leaders learn best through on-the-job experience, so they don't need training. The reality is while hands-on experience is crucial, it's not a substitute for structured development. If they figured it out in sales, the lie goes, they'll figure out sales leadership. Our research showed that 80% of sales leaders received zero training once being promoted. And without a foundational framework, leaders fall back on bad habits. They fall back on leadership styles they've experienced before, and they may not be effective. Lie number four, all sales leaders are the same and require the same training. The reality is that sales leadership roles can vary dramatically based on the product, the sales cycle, the target market, and even the level of a sales leader. Like a frontline sales leader is going to have different development than a VP of sales. So leading a transactional team is very different than consultative sales. If you have an inside sales team, those are going to be different than an outside sales team. So every role requires a unique blend of skills and development. And lastly, this was mentioned before, but the lie is that sales leadership is a one-time event done at sales kickoff meetings or national conferences. And the truth is, although I do sales leadership at those events, the skills that are required to make a really great sales leader are evolving, and it needs to be constant. There's new technology all the time, changing market conditions. It's Leadership is a continuous journey of learning and adapting, and that's not something that can be done right away. So we've talked about how sales leadership is different than generalized leadership. We've talked about the 5 lies. Here's some of the consequences of confusing them, buying into the lies, the myths, the biases, the assumptions. Number 1 is stunted sales growth and underperformance. When sales leaders lack specific training, they become a bottleneck to growth. And if your organization's trying to scale, you can't do that through sales training alone. So if there's stunted sales growth being caused by these bottlenecks, the sales leaders aren't equipped to bring a consistent performance and higher revenue. The second consequence is high sales leader turnover and rep turnover. Right now, the average tenure, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but the average tenure for sales and sales leaders is 18 to 19 months. Without proper development, sales leaders can quickly burn out due to amplified pressure and a lack of skills to manage it. So slowing down that vicious cycle of high turnover among sales leaders who feel underprepared and overwhelmed, and sales reps who feel unsupported and disengaged. Reactive leadership is the third consequence. So generic leadership training doesn't often define what a great sales leader actually does or where they should focus their time. This ambiguity leads to leaders who are constantly in reactive mode, addressing immediate problems or things that feel like problems and they're not really problems. But a sales leader who went through a recent program I facilitated said that the biggest thing that she had received from that was an idea of what good looked like, what she knew could be possible through proper communication, expectations, and coaching. And so she was able to be more proactive in her leadership, which she was able to get ahead of problems. And that was a very powerful thing. And I know that anyone who works with sales and sales leadership knows how reactive. The reality is 70% of their world is always going to be reactive. But what can we do to help increase their proactiveness? And that is really going to be done through great sales leadership development. Fourth consequence is no bench strength. Having specific sales leadership development, it forces organizations to actually define what success looks like and to recruit and promote people with those inherent talents for it, coupled with development. Organizations without sales leadership promote the top salesperson or the one who's been there the longest, which really isn't smart succession planning. And the last one is disengaged salespeople. Sales environments are really unique. And when leaders aren't trained to understand the wiring of salespeople and to balance performance with people, to be fostering those relationships, create fun and high energy, it can lead to demotivated salespeople and a decline in overall sales culture. So that's a little negative. So whenever I'm talking about something and the consequences, I like to flip it. And I think it's important because we want to be focusing on the positive. So we know what consequences are. So the question on your screen, and I would love for you to contribute in the chat, and I'm going to ask it in a couple different ways. But what would be possible for your sales leaders if we busted those myths and lies about them and provided them the support they need and deserve? Or for those of you who have already developed sales leadership programs, what have you seen that's been possible because of this distinguishment between generalized leadership development and sales leadership, and kind of busting some of those lies about sales leadership? Oh, sorry, I'm going back to some of the lies. Thank you for contributing in the chat. So I'll read some of these. Um, the lie is that sales leadership is about telling others what to do. Yes, that is a lie. You don't need, it's actually better not to. And then another lie here. As a salesperson, I must have all the answers. Lie. It's a lie. Leveraging knowledge with research, team, and peers. Yeah, you don't have to, just like a salesperson doesn't have to be the end all be all resource for a client, the sales leader doesn't need to be the end all be all resource for their team. Okay, so here we have so busting lies and leadership about leadership allow teams to envision desirable outcomes and busting lies about leadership and burnout. Yeah, it's so fun to see sales leaders transform and organizations transform. Thank you for participating. It makes it seem like I'm not talking to myself. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get on with the 7 non-negotiables of sales leadership programs. We've discussed the differences, we've talked about the lies. Let's get into a little bit more of the meat here. I want to say these 7 are not all the non-negotiables that we have at Rise Up Consulting. It's virtually impossible to share all these little nuances. Like, for example, I don't have technology on here. That's pretty important, right? But for the intents and purposes of today, and I didn't know where people were coming from in this webinar. If you've never started a sales leadership program, or you've been through one iteration, or you're trying to build upon what it is, these are really important. So, and they're a good litmus test to say, how are you doing? So maybe even assessing yourself on these 7 would be really helpful too. So let's start, and we're going to talk about measuring the program's impact. So to demonstrate the true value of a sales leadership program, it's really crucial to implement robust measurement strategies that capture both the individual sales leader's development and the business impact. So measuring involves conducting assessments before and after the program to quantify participants' growth using tools like 360-degree feedback and leadership competency assessments. And the data not only shows individual progress, but it helps refine the program. There's a lot of data for those of you who look at the progress and the feedback. So at Rise Up Consulting, we have created assessments for our proprietary programs and the customized ones we create with our clients based on the skills that sales leaders need to have and how they put those into action in their context. And often these program assessments, which are completed by sales leaders in the program and their managers, they bring disconnects with how they rate themselves and how their manager does. And usually there are discrepancies in there. And I want to get real here. Not every sales leader knows everything. And these assessments are not to catch what they do wrong. It is to catch them doing things right and find pieces of evidence that they are growing through the program and that the impact is being positive on the team. As far as 360-degree assessments, there's so many on the market. We use the Leadership Circle profile assessments. And while those aren't really targeted to sales leaders, it allows leaders to connect the story that they've told themselves about what they've believed, their experiences and their paradigms, and how that shows up for them as sales leaders. It also, if you use 360s, whatever you use, as everyone goes through the program, the powerful thing that it does is it creates vulnerability and bonds among participants. They all understand everyone's doing the inner work to work on themselves as better people and better sales leaders. And it's a phenomenal thing to do. I'm working with a VP of sales right now who just took his 360 2 months ago, and it shook him to his core. But it has been the spark that he's needed, and he's making changes. And anyone who's led sales leaders, if you are sales leaders or just us as people, we all understand sometimes we spend a lot of time and energy trying to make other people change. But when we simply change how we see them, or how we change how we see what's happening, we're able to actually move the needle. And the needle in sales means more revenue, uh, higher tenure, and better recruiting. So, and then beyond the individual development of sales leaders that you do, the business metrics are really essential. So, if for those of you who are tracking engagement scores, how does that make an impact on their units and teams' engagement scores? How is that helping pipeline health? Team retention, all of those are really great metrics to make sure that you're tracking. I'm curious. I'm going to go back to the chat and read anything that I've missed here. But have you found any assessments, whether they be strength assessments, before and after program assessments? Does anyone have any great ones that they'd like to share as a good resource? I just shared a few. I believe in looking at things constantly to reassess. So as I continue, if you have one of those assessments that work, please put that in the chat. And that would be a great resource for anyone who's with us here today. Okay, number 2, the other non-negotiable is defining success, which seems a little silly that that wouldn't be done, but it is. This 5 column, this is actually the bulk of work that I end up doing. This seems very simple, but it takes a forced intentionality and conversations and alignment about this. The first column on talents, this is important because leadership is not just a skill, it's about innate capabilities and certain wiring that people have. Talent is the greatest predictor of future success. So before we invest significant resources in developing someone, we need to understand if they possess those aptitudes and talents in your specific organizational context. We all know that the best training cannot fix a misaligned leader. So asking what are the talents that are needed in this role? Or you can flip this and say, what are the talents of this individual and how can those shine in a sales leadership role? The other columns are about the mindset. What is successful? What is a successful sales leadership mindset? Things like positivity and abundancy, and they love leading other people, things like that. The behaviors, there's a whole KPIs we have that we assign to sales leaders, not just sales people, but what are the behaviors of success look like? An organization I'm working with couldn't decide if it was weekly one-on-ones or if it was bi-weekly one-on-ones. How often are performance reviews being done? Behaviors of sales leaders like shadowing or listening to call replays or riding along. How many times should they be doing that? Like, what are those behaviors that they should be doing? The skills are all the skills, the communication, the listening, all of those. And then lastly, what does performance look like? What are they responsible for? Getting clear on this and defining success is going to help with everything else in the program. So number 3, the third non-negotiable is playing to strengths. Once we identify what success looks like, we want to refine our understanding through strength-based approaches. You can use personality assessments. You can use feedback from people. You can give assignments to say, hey, to talk to people they know, former colleagues, friends. They can ask, what do you think my strengths are? They can reflect on their own strengths. You don't have to do an assessment. But this is a very powerful key, and I think really an X factor when it comes to L&D's role in organizations and the impact that you make in a more proactive manner. This programs are not sales leadership programs. We deal with big egos in a really good way, right? In a really good way. We can't make programs about what we're fixing in them, but really maximizing their inherent strengths. And when leaders come from a place of strength, they're more effective, they're more energized, and they're ultimately more successful. This helps them bring out the strengths in the people that they coach, and they build teams that are going to complement each other's strengths. It also impacts what your organization feels about your sales leadership development program. So when leaders go from talking about a program and it's focused on their strengths, they go from, oh, you have to take that sales leadership program. That's for leaders who don't know what they're doing, to all of the best leaders are applying in this program or have gone through it because they are sharpening their saw together. They know it's building on their strengths. It's a very different feel. And just like great sales leaders know the strengths of those on their team and themselves, great enablement leaders know the strengths of the people in their programs. And the program's content execution should be playing to the strengths in the group. So I had an organization that a lot of their leaders were very visual. I don't need to see something necessarily before I do it, but they did. And they kept asking for a schematic, for a visual, whether it even be like a simple drawing. And so before they role played, before they started implementing. And so I had to shift for who they were. We had to shift to more hands-on. We had to stay completely out of theory and go really into practicality because that's how they best learned. So overall, this whole slide, this whole non-negotiable is just thinking about how can we bring out the best in them, play to their strengths, and build upon what's working. Number 4 is strengthening relationships. Leadership is inherently about people, and great sales leadership development programs need to create time for relationships. It's not just about networking, it's about building genuine connections with their peers in the program, with executives that sit in on programs, with program facilitators. And these relationships, they foster belonging, psychological safety, and that's very important for development. A simple way to do this is to get people around food. Um, Alcohol and drinks, that's a whole can of worms we sometimes don't want to open in the sales culture. That's very common. But get them around food. And I don't know if this is how we're just wired as people, back to our caveman days. And when someone brought in some meat, we all sat around and ate it. But there's something about we let our guard down when we're eating food. And so having dynamics within the program that's about relationships, you're doing something fun, um, get that into play. And it's a very, very fun thing to see. Fifth non-negotiable is including practice. I've already talked about this a little bit, but learning how to lead is like learning how to ride a bike. You can read as many books as you want, listen to as many podcasts as you want, but until you actually do it and try, you're not going to really learn. So making this customized, we talked about some of those scenarios earlier. And I have honestly, in my evolution as a professional helping, we've come a long way at Rise Up Consulting with how we've done this. I used to teach the part and then I would save the hands-on for later in the day or at the end of the training session. And as we all know, those get cut for time. And so weaving into practice, making people feel uncomfortable, getting comfortable feeling uncomfortable and practicing is a good thing to do. Now you can do this during your time together. You can provide exercises to do in between with a partner. You can utilize AI role playing and coaching, however you want to do it. But I would love people to put in the chat as well. If you found, if there's a best practice you found about putting practice into your programs. Okay, so I've just seen here too, going back to the chat, I'll get to 6 and 7 here in just a minute. But someone just suggested DISC, the DISC assessment, which is a great assessment. We use Colby. I have clients that use Strengths Finder, Gallup and Clifton Strengths Finders. The Enneagram is actually a phenomenal one as well to use because it's the egos with sales in particular. But thank you for sharing. But there's a lot of great assessments. If you'd also like to share in the chat what you've done for practice, and we'll move on here to um, powerful sales specific content in just a second. So, okay, so Carol says creating realistic scenarios, mixing groups, having standing tables, not sitting. That's a ninja move. I like that. Thank you. Thank you for contributing. Okay, so the sixth non-negotiable is powerful sales specific content. So I will admit that the content, it's been an evolution for our programs. Um, it's been There's a lot of great research out there, and I encourage, I'm sure all of you have done your research. If you're here, you are obviously learners and you're very curious, and I'm sure that's why you're always on top of your game. I have done so much research and conducted my own research, and the conversations, it's kind of like evolved, right, of what we've done and how we've been able to put our proprietary programs together. The easiest way I feel of attacking this, because we can get really caught up in the weeds and get very specific, is I try to go big picture and then move into targeted specifics. So, what skills do current sales leaders not possess you wish they did? You could go back to the defining success. You could use that to make your sales leadership development programs. What behaviors do they need? How should they lead in their executive presence, their energy, their mindset? Um, it can get overwhelming, I think, like sometimes coming up with powerful sales specific content because we hear a lot of good ideas. And then we go, oh, well, this sales enablement professional or that learning and development leader, they put this in their program. We need to have it in ours. And it just gets really overwhelming. There's so many great things that could be in there. But at the end of the day, for a sales leadership program, what are the essentials? We don't have a ton of time with them. We want to make it good bang for their buck on where they're spending their time and implementable. So overall, just making sure the order, but however you decide your content, the order of the execution of the program should build upon itself. So making sure that you do that. And then lastly here, an executive sponsor. So a truly great sales leadership program needs a corporate sponsor you can collaborate with. And this is not just someone who signs off on the budget. This is a senior executive or two, ideally from sales or a closely aligned function, who champions the program, advocates for participants, removes roadblocks, maybe provides strategic career guidance. Um, it's really important for alignment. Now, as a outside consultant, I simply don't work with organizations who don't have a corporate sponsor because I just don't make it into the organization. So, so for those of you internal learning and development professionals, figuring out who that person is and having one or two in the backup. Because when senior leadership shifts and you lose your corporate executive sponsor, it's important that there's another person you've built a relationship with. So having one is very important, but having several that you're keeping in the loop and that are bopping in, excited about your program, rooting for you is really key. So to summarize, kind of back to the big picture here, a great sales leadership program is not just a series of training modules. It's a strategically designed journey that begins with understanding inherent talent, builds upon strengths, fosters crucial relationships, provides ample time for practice, rigorously measures progress, demonstrates business impact, and ensures the content truly builds upon itself. So you want to be developing these exceptional sales leaders by creating that sustainable pipeline of talent. And these are pretty good building blocks to get there. So comments here, I appreciate those of you guys who are doing such a good job adding. It's really great things. Okay, so we have ID selling and leadership weaknesses and improvements or opportunities to put a program into practice. And I forgot what even question this is, so I apologize. But those are phenomenal ideas of understanding the strengths and the weaknesses. We try to do role playing, but leaders end up just talking to each other versus formal role playing. Yeah. Carolyn, I just had this happen yesterday with a group of sales leaders. They were talking about rolling out a ride along assessment. They have outside salespeople. and because we had created that. And they go, well, here's what I would say. And like I said, okay, timeout, role play time. And they had to, it's very different. It's like here's what I would do. Okay, great. Tell me how you would do it. I'm a salesperson. Talk to me like you're doing this. So I appreciate that because the intention of role play, you're right, it does turn into talking about it, or people forget the character they're in and then they start talking about something and going down a tangent. So that's great. I think this comment about they need to participate in the training excel, the execs, there it is. They absolutely do. And it's better to have sales executives, top sales leaders in the training that validate it. And it's kind of like, this is the place to be. So, thank you all. Thank you all for contributing. Here's what we're going to end up with in the next 5 minutes or so. I'm going to leave you 5 things you can do right now. And then we're going to have some time for more Q&A. So if there's overall questions you want to get going, you can message Casey. She will get those going for me at the end. But these are 5 things that we can do. So number one, shadow a sales leader program. This is a free thing for you to do. So how this works, and some of you guys may be doing these, but you identify current frontline and mid-level sales leaders who are open to being shadowed for a day or two, maybe even a couple of hours, depending on how it's structured. But this allows aspiring leaders to sit in on coaching sessions, pipeline reviews, performance calls. This provides exposure to leadership realities without commitment or cost and allows informal identification of potential leadership talent. There's a job description about the job, and then there's the real job. Then there's how it actually, like the ideal and the reality of it. And you'd rather find out how someone feels about a role before they interview or get into it. It's also a great opportunity to inspire future leaders. The numbers on the future of leadership is a little bit varied. Some of the research that's come out about Gen Z, but most of them, well, number one, they want to be self-employed. They don't want to work 9 to 5s, but they also don't want anything to do with leadership, right? Like, why would someone leave their 6-figure sales job to become a sales leader with more responsibilities? I could give you a million reasons because I think it's a wonderful role, but that's the thought process people go through. So the Shadow a Sales Leader program is not just helpful for them, but it's an opportunity to really have the sales leader share, here's why I do this. And here's the impact of the role of a sales leader at our organization. And you can inspire someone. You almost have to recruit sales leaders from within or outside the organization, but you have to inspire people to get there. So that's one. Second thing you can do is launch a book club. So I'm going to share a couple QR codes here to leave you with some valuable resources. This QR code is actually for the book club, that goes with my last book, Leaderboard to Leadership. I think if you downloaded it, even if you didn't read my book, I think it provides some good examples of things you could be talking about and how you might want to frame up and lead or delegate that to a sales leader. L&D and sales enablement doesn't need to be running everything, right? So you can have someone lead the book club. You just launch it. But it's you have to get very purposeful and specific in that conversation. So this gets people thinking about sales leadership again, but you can see who takes this seriously. It's always shocking to me for book clubs, and I'm not talking about the Thursday night wine book clubs, right, where no one ever reads the book, it's just a girls' night out, but book clubs, professional book clubs at organizations where you get there and people didn't read the book. And we know that leaders need to be learners. And so that gives insight of like, you know what? They say they want to be a leader. Do they really want to be a leader? It also exposes the conversation does to the phenomenal ideas that come out of people's mouths and what they apply from it. So I know I mentioned earlier this whole thing, this Leadership Live webinar is about how generalized leadership is different than sales leadership, and I firmly stand by that. However, I also believe in the power of generalized leadership books. Okay, so, but if you're doing a book club, make sure the questions and the topics and the conversation is geared for sales leadership. The third one is Leader for a Day contest. You can have a very fun contest, and then the winner gets to be the leader for the day. They can inspire, it's like inspiring leadership. Now, there's going to be some rules. They can't fire anyone. They're not allowed to change the comp plans, But nothing is really more fun than seeing someone shine when given opportunity. And this allows them to have some empathy for leaders. Like sales leadership isn't as easy as it seems, but also some of the ideas they're going to come up with are going to be really fun. Even within our sales leadership programs, we allow participants, encourage participants is a better way to say that, to actually teach segments in the program. Because when you teach something, you learn it. Same thing, when you act as a leader, you see that in a different light, and it really brings out the seriousness of how much they want to do it. Fourth one is stretch assignments. These are not anything new, but creating these mini projects. This could be maybe they're helping onboard a new rep. They're leading a team huddle. Maybe they're helping improve a sales process. These could be things leaders want to delegate anyway. One thing about the stretch assignments is that I say that delegation without direction leads to disappointment. So these stretch assignments, this is not a new concept. This is not, great idea, Rebecca. But it is a great reminder, I feel, of what stretch assignments could we be offering sales leaders, the frontline sales leaders, the mid-level sales leaders, and so on and so forth. And the fifth one is host a quarterly sales leadership roundtable. At Rise Up Consulting, I've hosted these for over 4 years. These are really powerful. They get ideas moving. People can see who else thinks like them. So it's kind of like a book club on steroids. They can bring their own challenges to this, opportunities that they're seeing. You could have speakers come in. Just a plug, if you're watching this live, our next executive roundtable is actually on September 10th. So I have some sales enablement, leadership, or learning and development and sales leaders joining. I've got like 2 spots. It's a free thing. It's from 9 to 11 Central Time. And it's the only one we're doing, I think, until fourth quarter. But if you'd like an idea of how sales leadership roundtables work, feel free to reach out to me. And we'll give a bonus. A bonus thing you can do is audit your existing leadership development program. What's already there? What frameworks could you also use for sales leadership that wouldn't get confusing? There's some power in that. Okay. So I am an activator. As we end here today, this is a QR code for LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, continue the conversation. But I'm curious, and the final things before we get into questions are what are you going to do from today? What's the action item you're going to follow up with? So as an activator, I always feel like the worst thing possible would be if we were all here today and nothing happened, you know? So in the chat, if you could be sharing what's one follow-up item that you're going to do today. And then for those of you who would like more resources, this is a QR code for our website where we have free resources, things like a team culture worksheet, a sales leader success planner, how to help them organize their time on a weekly basis and really prioritize. So thank you so much for the time here, for being here. But again, make that plan. And then I'm curious to look into the chat here of what your action items are. And then any questions, Casey, if there were additional questions that came in.
No additional questions in the Q&A section. Just lots of great feedback in the chat section, honestly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I see the last comment is just review these non-negotiables with the team. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. So what makes me feel really good as a consultant is knowing that the work that I do helps anyone in any sort of capacity. So thank you for that. This will probably be the end of the webinar in case you can kind of wrap us up. But there was a question. LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me. That's where I prefer to connect. So please connect with me. Let me know you were on this webinar and we'll connect from there. But Casey, I can hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for such a great session. I knew this was going to be a good one. And thank you to everyone who joined us, all the great feedback in the chat section. Kara even got us kind of a recap, some takeaways. Very cool. Thank you guys so much.